What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American, here today to react and learn about the 1943 battle between Canada and America. And to be completely honest, even though this conflict includes America, I've never heard of it before. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, in 1943, wouldn't that be World War II? Where Canada and America were allies? So, why were we fighting? I'm a bit confused about all this, to be honest. So, I'm looking forward to taking a look at this video and finding out what all of this is about and learning about the history of this 1943 battle, Canada and the US. So let's take a look.
During World War II, US and Canadian forces actually entered full-scale combat operations against each other in one of the conflict's most tragic incidents.
What? Full-scale conflict between each other? And this was extremely tragic? So many different, theories are running through my mind right now, what? At first I was like, was it an accident? Did Canadians and Americans get into a battle was there a mistake or a miscommunication, or what was this about? I'm genuinely really curious.
It resulted in significant casualties and a great deal of recrimination. So
Wow.
Where did this tragedy occur?
Yeah.
The answer is a cold, windswept, often fog-bound island in the North Pacific named Kiska, part of the Aleutian Islands chain in Alaska.
Okay, thank God. I was like, he's saying a lot of words about where this is, but I have no idea where Kisker is. It's an island? An island in Alaska. That kind of... Man, if there was anywhere that the United States and Canada were going to have a battle, maybe Alaska kind of makes sense. I'm also just kind of amazed because 1943, it's a long time ago, but it's not that long ago. 80 years now about, There's people alive today who experienced, who were alive when this battle took place. That's pretty crazy to me. In Alaska? An island in Alaska. We're fighting. Why? Why?
Japan had attacked the Aleutians in summer 1942 as a diversionary operation as part of their Midway Island campaign.
Okay.
Midway turned into a complete disaster for the Imperial Japanese Navy, but in the north, Japanese forces managed to occupy several remote Aleutian islands.
I never realized, holy cow, I never realized how far Alaska sticks out. I know I'm kind of getting off topic here, but even as an American, Americans have an interesting relationship with Alaska. It's almost, I don't want to be mean to Alaskans, but it's almost kind of forgotten about, to be completely honest. It's far away from the rest of the United States. It's a completely different climate. It's very cold and different. And I don't know. I didn't know its tail stuck out so far. I don't know how else to put it.
On the 6th of June 1942, a Japanese force of 500 Marines had captured Kiska, followed by 2,000 Army troops.
Okay.
The US determined to recapture its lost Aleutian territories and instigated a series of amphibious operations.
So it's an Alaskan island, Kisker. Japanese forces have taken control of it, and the United States wants to take it back. Makes complete sense to me. How is Canada going to get involved? And how is Canada and the US going to end up on opposite sides of this conflict? That's what I'm really wondering.
In May 1943, the island of Attu was recaptured after very fierce fighting with its Japanese garrison.
Okay.
Attu and Kiska's geographic positions controlled the sea lanes across the North Pacific.
Sure.
The Americans feared that the Japanese would turn the islands into strategic air bases from which to bomb Alaska and the US West Coast. The threat had to be eliminated.
Okay, I was just going to pause and say, I never really thought about how much of a strategic outpost these islands in Canada, these islands in Alaska would be. See, subconsciously, part of me is like, Alaska, that's in Canada, right? These islands in Alaska are really strategic, like important points for Japanese bases and military operations to be established. That'd be really, really bad for the United States. So this makes sense to me. I actually never remember learning about any of this specific conflict in World War II, even in our American history class, actually.
There was also the idea of using the Aleutians for US heavy bomber bases to attack the Japanese home islands. Attu fell at a cost of 549 Americans killed,
Wow.
1,148 wounded, and a further 1,814 sick or died from disease,
Oh my
demonstrating the
God.
inhospitable nature of these exposed subarctic islands.
Wow. Right. Like that's kind of what I was also getting at is the climate is very, very different in Alaska. It's similar to Canada, and it would be very difficult certainly for Americans to try to get used to this.
The operation to recapture Kiska, codenamed Cottage, would commence on the 15th of August 1943.
Okay.
Unusually for the Pacific Theater, Cottage would be a joint US-Canadian affair.
Okay. It's a joint project where the United States and Canada are working together to try to take back this Alaskan island. So far, sounds great. It's not great. It's death and war, but America, Canada, working side by side for humanity. It's good. Okay. I feel like this is going to take a terrible dark turn soon.
The US force consisted of the 7th Infantry Division and the 87th Mountain Infantry Regiment of the 10th Mountain Division.
Okay.
The Canadian 6th Infantry Division provided its 13th Infantry Brigade. There was also the 1st Special Service Force, a joint US-Canadian commando unit.
Oh, wow.
The US knew that the Japanese garrison on Kiska numbered over 10,000 men, with anti-aircraft guns
Wow.
and some artillery.
Wow. 10,000 Japanese soldiers on this island protecting it.
They expected a stiff fight.
Yeah.
A significant naval bombardment commenced on the morning of the 15th of August, including almost 100 Allied ships, plastering known Japanese positions before over 34,000 US and Canadian troops began boarding landing craft.
Wow. Yeah, Canada was really doing a favor working with the United States, sending your own men and women into harm's way, into war, to fight for an American territory. So America should be quite thankful for this, honestly. Some of these pictures are pretty incredible, by the way. Like, is this actually the battle, like, by the island? Like, with all these ships? And that's pretty nuts. Oh my God.
It was reported that the Japanese had carefully fortified the island with bunkers and tunnels and could be expected to fight to the death.
Oh,
Though
God.
some indications were received by the Americans that the Japanese had actually withdrawn from Kiska, US Higher Command ordered Operation Cottage to proceed, they believing that the Japanese had instead retreated into the interior of the island.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is a much bigger operation than I realized. This was a whole thing. Does this have a name? Is it like the Battle of Kiska? Or they said Operation Cottage, I guess.
In the mountains to await the invasion. The landings were a bit of a mess. Though the weather was clear, vessels ran aground and timetables were wrecked. There was no Japanese resistance. Fog then came down, reducing visibility as troops moved inland.
So they are invading the island now. They're the Canadian and American forces working together. They're not really encountering any Japanese resistance. The Japanese have either fully retreated or have gone further back on the island. But So far, so good. Well, except for some botched landings and some fog.
Gunfire was heard all the time as soldiers shot at suspected positions, and explosions went off as Japanese booby traps detonated or people stepped on mines.
Oh, wow.
Allied artillery continued firing into the fog and mist, adding to the impression that resistance was being met.
So they were just like encountering booby traps, which is horrible, by the way. They're just like firing artillery shells and missiles, just like firing it into the mist, into the fog, the nothing, and like hoping they're doing something, but they're not really sure. Or this seems kind of like questionable already.
Into the fog and mist, adding to the impression that resistance was being met.
Okay.
At one point, US and Canadian troops advancing from different directions in the fog bumped into one another with tragic consequences.
No. No. Are you kidding me? That's what this is about. Are you freaking kidding me? This is the most tragic... This is the most tragic military story I've heard. I mean, and I think what's most tragic about it is that it's allies fighting each other. Canadians and American forces are wandering around this island in the fog, unable to see, and they come around and start going towards each other. And they can't, the visibility is very low, and they just start fighting each other. That's what this is. Oh my God. What a tragedy. Unbelievable. I guess if we're going back like to 1943, you'd think they'd have communications though. I was like, what do you blame this on? Because in the modern day, you'd have GPS, you'd have cell phones, computers talking to each other. This would never happen. You'd never accidentally fight your ally. But 1943, it's like maybe they had some walkie-talkies, radios, stuff like that, and unfortunately, like the miscommunication happened, and Americans and Canadians bumped into each other and started fighting.
Both sides were clearly seeing abandoned Japanese positions, expecting at any moment to run into the Japanese main line of resistance.
Yeah.
Seeing figures moving in the poor visibility and unaware of the position of US units, a jumpy Canadian soldier opened fire. The Americans, seeing unidentified figures firing on them, returned fire, believing the...
It's like the perfect storm. The perfect set of circumstances. Of course, like, you know, you're in war. A part of it is if you're going to be in war and have a gun, and there is some responsibility that carries with you, without a doubt. But at the same time, you're wandering around an island in the fog, booby-trapped with enemy soldiers maybe hiding around every corner. Of course you're going to shoot at them if you think your life is at stake. So I don't think it's really anyone's fault. It's just a really unfortunate circumstance. I mean, maybe the planning could have been better on both for America and Canada. Like, instead of just wandering around the island haphazardly, they could have very, very meticulously planned out their routes or to try to avoid this kind of thing. But I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know every thing about it.
Americans, seeing unidentified figures firing on them, returned fire, believing the Canadians were Japanese. One of the problems may have been the helmets that both sides were wearing. From a distance and in poor visibility, the US M1 helmet could easily be mistaken for a Japanese steel helmet.
Yeah, so the soldiers, to Canadians, American uniforms, the silhouette kind of looks like Japanese uniform or the helmet.
And for this operation, the Canadian forces had given up their British-style Brodie helmets and been re-equipped with US M1 helmets.
Oh my God. this is really unfortunate. Perfect set of circumstances for this to happen.
Again, US forces, perhaps not familiar with Canadians wearing non-British style uniforms, fired on them believing they were Japanese simply by the shape of these helmets.
Yeah.
A full-scale
Yeah.
battle commenced as both sides hammered the other. When identifications were eventually established and the firing was stopped, casualties were significant.
Oh my god, full-scale battle. They, like, for, I don't know, how long did this last? Like a day or two, or how long? They were full scale shooting at each other, trying to take each other's army regiments out. I wonder how they finally realized the mistake. How long it took to realize the error.
Occasions were eventually established and the firing was stopped. Casualties were significant. The Canadians had killed 28 Americans and lost 4 of their own. A further 50 US and Canadian soldiers lay wounded. Japanese time bombs, booby traps, and accidents killed or wounded many more soldiers on Kiska.
This is so tragic. This is, again, going into this, I was like, why? Why is Canada and the US fighting during World War II? That doesn't make sense. And that's the answer. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't have happened.
The biggest single loss was to the US Navy when a stray Japanese sea mine collided with the destroyer USS Abner Reed, blasting off the vessel's stern and killing 71 crewmen and injuring a further 47.
Oh my god.
The island of Kiska was soon declared captured, but not one Japanese soldier was found anywhere on the island. US intelligence had been right to be suspicious. For one,
they finally got the island back, Kisker. They never encountered a Japanese soldier. All of the fighting on Kisker was between Canadians and Americans. Imagine that.
Once the Japanese had decided to retreat rather than fight and had successfully evacuated the barren island. But somehow the invasion force had suffered 313 casualties invading an empty island.
Oh my god, it's so bad. When you put it like that, it's so bad. So tragic. 300 deaths, taking back an empty island. I mean, it had traps. It had booby traps, and the unfortunate thing with the fog and
caused by an appalling series of friendly fire incidents demonstrating poor inter-allied cooperation and a series of clever Japanese booby traps which had taken the lives of many unsuspecting soldiers. None of this was reported in the press or newsreels at the time for obvious reasons, but Operation Cottage was an embarrassment of fairly big proportions for the US and Canadian militaries.
That makes a lot of sense, honestly. If you're in the middle of World War II, you do not publish this news that Canada and America just accidentally killed some of each other's soldiers, taking back an empty island. You just don't. I agree. And apparently this isn't really something we talk about to this day in American history. This is a pretty specific battle, specific part of World War II. I had never heard of it. I was never taught about this. And probably because we're a little bit embarrassed.
Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share. And also visit my...
Wow. What a story. That was insane. Holy cow. Again, going into this, I was like, what? So, Canada and America at war? Battle? Oh, what a tragedy. But this was a very well done video. It was by Mark Felton Productions. And I gotta give it a like. Even though I did not like this story. It was fascinating. Maybe there's lessons to be learned here. And it's part of our history. Holy cow. I had no idea about this. Interesting though. Sad. Anyway, if you got any enjoyment out of learning this story as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on this forgotten 1943 battle between Canada and America. if you have ever heard of it before, or your thoughts on how this went down. As a Canadian, the Canadian perspective would be interesting on this. That'd be great. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and Canadian culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.